Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. All right, welcome back for another episode of the Freight 360 podcast. This episode is brought to you by Blue Book Services. Are you looking to quickly identify qualified sales prospects? Looking to develop trusted, sustainable business partnerships? Well, look no further. The Lumber Blue Book is an online directory and credit resource for the lumber and forest products industry, covering mills, manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. Their database of over 23,000 lumber companies can be searched and segmented to develop sales and marketing campaigns. Members receive access to real-time credit and business information for companies throughout the industry. To learn more, go to lumberbluebook.com and click Join Today. That's lumberbluebook.com. All right. Well, we got a great episode number 204 here today. As always, thanks for joining us. Continue to send us your questions. Share us with your friends in the industry. Leave us comments on the YouTube version of this or send us an email, info@freight360.net, or just go to our website and hit the comment or the contact form, and we'll make sure to answer your questions. We have an awesome guest today, Jeff Hopper. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at DAT. We're going to talk some fraud today. But Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Great. Good to be here.
Awesome. So talk us through Chief Marketing Officer at DAT. What does that role entail? How long you've been there and how's things going?
Yeah. So I've been at DAT now for about 4.5 years. And by the way, it's either DAT or DAT. Most people refer to us as DAT. That's fine too. So about 4.5 years. So somewhat new to the industry, responsible for all things marketing and the business of DAT. And then I also oversee the customer service organization, for which we have our network governance kind of function. So any kind of behavior or things that are go on in our network goes through that awesome team of 20 plus people just on like compliance and governing business being conducted on our platform. And so when fraud hit, hard, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure, about a year ago, it started to really ramp up. That team was, on the front line, fighting that every day. And, we've been doing that for, 45 years, 45-year-old company. And so nothing new to us, but it's been really crazy in terms of what's gone on there.
Yeah, I bet. Well, yeah, we're going to have an awesome conversation about fraud today. I can't wait to dig into it. Ben, how are you? I feel like we didn't even say hi to you yet.
Doing well. Trying to stay in the air conditioning.
If you're watching on YouTube, Ben is decked out in DAT gear right now with the hat and the is that the new polo?
This is the new polo. These are the new ones we got this year. Yeah, I like the older hats, but this is the newer polo. Yep.
Yeah. Nice.
Way to represent, Ben. Appreciate it.
Try to do my best.
All right, little sports update here. Well, actually, I got a couple things. So first off, last week we talked about the women's national team. They lost. Did you guys? I don't know if anyone watched it. Did you guys see like the crazy ending with that U.S. and Sweden game?
Yeah,
it was on like 5 a.m. Eastern time, but like
I saw the
penalty kicks, and then like apparently our girls don't know how to aim at the net, and like they scored on like what looked like a catch, but ended up, I guess, it crossed the threshold. But
yeah,
wild game.
Yeah, wild game. Disappointing ending for Team USA.
Yeah. Sure. Also, Ben, somebody commented on our YouTube video. I think it was from last week. So his name is Eric, and we were talking about, was it when you win the Open, like what's the title? And he said, winning the Open gives the winner the bragging rights of Champion Golfer of the Year. Great episode. I'm using a lot of your training and information to help me in my new role working as a freight broker. So Champion Golfer of the Year, that's the one we were trying to figure out. It was
driving me nuts. We were talking about, the Open, Jeff, on last week's episode, and it was like right on the tip of my tongue. I'm like, I can't remember what they call the winner of it, but I'm like, it's like considered like the top championship in golf because it's the oldest, and that's what we were going back and forth.
Yeah.
Champion Golfer of the Year.
You win the Masters, you would think that would be the ultimate. You're the master of the Masters, right? So, but whatever.
Right.
And I think it's Bobby Jones, right, that literally built Augusta as his homage to, I think, the old course in the United States. Like that was like the main reason why he wanted to build it and wanted to have a tournament that was there every year that was not comparative, but as close in the United States as you could come to, well, becoming
I never
champion
knew
golfer of
that.
the year.
I didn't know that either. I'm
Ben's the
already
big
learning.
golf guy, so there's
Oh,
your tip for the week. NFL preseason is back. The Hall of Fame game was last week, and it was actually kind of surprising. So it was the Browns and the Jets, and everyone just thought the Jets were going to blow them out. And they had like a, I don't know, double-digit lead, and Cleveland came back. I know it's preseason, doesn't really mean anything. It wasn't like Aaron Rodgers was out there playing. I'm sure we'll probably see him in the third week or whatever of preseason. Who knows? But the Bills, big Bills fan here. First game is this Saturday. I'll be there. It's Kids Day. I'll be taking my son, my older son, and my wife will be going. And Ben, week 2, I don't know if you saw it, the Bills and the Steelers, because Ben's a big Steelers fan.
oh.
We'll be playing you guys. I think it's actually like a Saturday night preseason game in the second week. Again, preseason, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always
When do
good
we play?
stuff.
When do we play? They released the schedule yet for the season?
Oh yeah. The whole schedule's out.
When do we play? When do we play each other?
I don't think we do this year in the regular. No, we don't play in the regular season this year, just the preseason. So
What's your standard when your teams play each other?
What's that?
What's your bet when your teams play?
Well, I mean, they haven't
Just
been very
bragging
they haven't been very like well matched up teams since we've
Yeah.
been doing this podcast for 4 years. So I don't actually. Pittsburgh did beat Buffalo like a few years back in week 1. I think it was like the 2020
It was
season,
2 years
the
ago, right
COVID
when we
season.
first started doing the show, because I
Yeah.
at least had like a period, and it was not a great season at least to the start that year too either. But like the one saving grace was that we did beat Buffalo in the first game. It was like the only bragging rights for most of half of the season.
There's a surprising, I mean, I get it. Pittsburgh and Buffalo are not too far apart, but there's a surprisingly large population of Steelers fans that are in Western New York. They're probably like outside of the Cowboys, who have fans everywhere. They're probably the biggest other
Team that
team
travels.
that has representation in Buffalo. So
There's a famous story that the NFL commissioner asked Art Rooney back in, I think, the 70s, if the Steelers wanted to be America's team, and he basically had said, no, the Cowboys can have that. Like, we're going to be Pittsburgh's team.
Yeah.
Again, could just be Pittsburgh folklore.
The audacity of declaring your America's team is in itself.
Jeff, where's your allegiance lie when it comes to football?
Oh, that's neat. Well, okay. So like most people grew up, playing in my hometown of Kansas City area. So the Chiefs were like my team growing up. So you never let go of that. Right. And then since then, though, I've lived as an adult, most of my adult life in the Great Northwest, Pacific Northwest. So the Seahawks. So I kind of root for both, and loyal to both. And
you've got an NFC and an AFC team. I think that's fair.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's allowed. That's allowed. The
You know,
Chiefs, man, that's probably one of
Super
Buffalo's biggest rivals right now, obviously. But Pat Mahomes is a ton of fun to watch. I just finished up the quarterback series on Netflix, and like watching him throughout the whole 2022 season or 2022-23 season, and then all the way through the playoffs and to win the Super Bowl is really cool. I mean, obviously, in the playoffs, it's tough as a Bills fan to just go out early and then watch, the Chiefs go on like that. But it is what it is.
Yeah, they need to play better in the playoffs. There's a lot of good teams. Vikings, they just don't play well in the playoffs. It's but hey, you know what? Josh Allen, awesome. When you got Josh Allen, you got hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see how this year goes. It's, all it takes is like an injury or something to throw off everything. Yeah. But lastly, on the NFL, DeMar Hamlin, he's back in like full gear practicing. I'm curious to see how the season goes and how they will or maybe won't use him. But huge, awesome recovery when a guy is like, you think he might be literally dead on the field, and now he's back. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Cool. Good stuff. Anything else on sports? Anything big that we missed there? Not that I could think of. But all right. So news real quick. The TIA Policy Forum is September 25th to 27th this year, and the FMCSA has agreed to have a seat at the table and voice questions from all of us brokers. I will be there, so if anybody is going to be at the Policy Forum, you'll see me. I did sign up for the golf event, which is, I think, the last day as well, so you can... There's my dog. You can play golf against me potentially. So some other news.
I will
Schneider,
be there.
What's that?
I will be there as well. So maybe we'll.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
We'll tee it
I'll
up
have
together.
to meet you in person then, Jeff. It'll be myself, another guy from the company I work for, Pierce Worldwide Logistics, and I think one of our brokers or our agents might be there as well. So we'll see. Other news. Schneider, the big trucking company, acquired M&M Transport. So now their fleet's over 6,500 trucks and $1.5 billion in revenue estimated now. I think you like this part of the market with rates going down, business or outbound shipping volumes going down. I think you see a lot of consolidation of companies that go out of business because they just don't have the profitability to stay in there. But $1.5 billion in estimated revenue, that's massive. And also $1.5 billion is the amount of debt that Yellow had when they declared bankruptcy in the last week, $700 million of which was from that federal loan. That's insane. Ben, we talked about that, I think, briefly last week, right? They got like basically $700 million in COVID money that they weren't eligible for. And it just
they qualified for it because they were a vendor under the DOD account, which you and I are both familiar with. And even when I read it, I'm like, that's how they qualified for that amount of money? Because basically they qualified under like the called like the fine print that it became like a required service or necessary service.
Yeah. What do they call that? The
I can't
essential workers. Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And they basically re-reviewed it and went. And the other thing I'd read, and again, I only read this from an article, so I have no idea how true it was, but it was like the overwhelming majority of that fund too. Like a lot of that money went to Yellow. Like there was very little outside of that got distributed. It kind of said basically within the industry because of that. And I think they had said, the same article said they had paid back like something like 230. And I think it honestly cited like $230, like not 230,000 or
million.
Again, it could have been a total
Why bother?
on Yellow situation. And I tried to send you a couple that gave you some better backstories because obviously their trouble goes back and back. Like they've not been profitable, I think, again, from a few articles going almost back to the last recession in like 2009. They had some restructuring. It didn't really go well. And then they went into the different avenue and they just never really got back on their feet and then borrowed a huge amount of money. And that was the other argument, saying that like they were arguably insolvent when they got this loan. And this loan was to help companies that weren't in that shape continue providing services. And they were like, for a lot of reasons, this shouldn't have gone down that way.
I almost feel like, I mean, whoever applied for and got that $700 million approved, like, shouldn't you face some kind of like legal repercussion?
I don't know. I either want to pat them on the back for being really
$1 from the taxpayers.
Like,
and they filed bankruptcy. So if that $700 million is what it was part of what they owed, and they're going bankrupt.
Well, the federal government got like 30%, give or take, of shares for that money, which are now arguably, I don't know what the market value is or how it'll play out. But
their stock price like went up a little bit right before they filed. It went up to, it was like $3 a share or something, but people were like trying to like time the market and make a quick buck before the bankruptcy.
My only thought was that like maybe somebody else thought they would be acquired, and then somehow the stock price would have rebounded a bit. And I don't know. I didn't really follow the rationale for why people were trading, and it seemed to be hitting the news that their stock was going up. But
so here's a question I have though. Like obviously all of their trucks and their facilities and their drivers, someone's at some point going to own those, right? Whether a company buys them up, but you wouldn't want to buy Yellow when they're that much in debt. You want them to file bankruptcy, and then when they have to liquidate all their stuff, then I think you buy up what you can at a discount.
Yeah,
is that probably the business mindset behind it?
And again, the articles I had read were basically that's how this really imploded on itself, was because how the news hit, their customers started pulling their business for fear that, that wasn't going to be serviced. And as soon as the flood of customers running out of the business happened at the same time they were renegotiating or trying to work through the labor union, the business was already gone. And at that point, they're like, there's nothing really to save in reorganization. Like, our customers have fled, we can't get them back unless we're stable, and we're not stable. So we can't go through reorganization because the business is gone. And you're right. Like, the only thing left were the employees, the assets, and the other side was, the network. But they were like, as far as revenues and customers, like, they got gutted based on just, companies running away to protect their own interests, which is, what happens in those scenarios.
It's wild, man. But I mean, hopefully everyone that was driving for yellow will find themselves gainfully employed as the future moves on. The last point in the news here, a lot of this we had it in our newsletter this week. The data shows, and I know we're with Jeff today. He's not the data guy. We've had Ken on before, and we've had some other folks from DAT. But the data is showing that it looks like we're at the bottom of the freight rate bubble, the freight recession, whatever you want to call it. But it also doesn't say we should bounce back real quick. I think Dean Croak was estimating Q3, Q4 is when we turn around. I think he was right? If we're at the bottom, we're going to start to turn it around now. He's a good Aussie. He's a smart one. Yeah. He might have had that right, but we'll see. I think next year, about a year from now, I think things will look a lot better. Because really, like, what's going to affect? Somebody asked me yesterday, we're going through a bid together, and they're like, what controls or affects the market? Like, what actually are the driving factors that cause the freight market to be the way it is? And I'm like, well, there's really two sides. You've got supply and demand, like any other economic cycle, and the supply comes from how many available trucks are there. And as carriers go out of business or they chop their fleet size down, that's going to equalize the supply side. But the demand is how much demand is there to actually ship freight, right? And we're not in a COVID money era anymore where the government's injecting money into businesses and handing out incentive money to people to go boost the economy. Interest rates are not low like they were before. So it's, I think a lot of the macro level stuff in our economy is what's going to impact the demand side of it. And unless there's a big economic shift there or a policy shift there, I don't think the demand side changes very quickly at all. So that's why I think you don't see anything for maybe another 6 months to a year on a strong rebound. I don't know. It's interesting.
The Fed just raised it. They'll meet again in a couple months. I think the market sentiment is that, if the jobs numbers don't go crazy, they likely keep rates where they are. I think that's the big thing that everyone's following, at least Wall Street, is what the job market looks like as it relates to inflation. But I think if the market does kind of stabilize and you can see the interest rates stabilize, you're going to see a lot of the other economies pick back up. Housing is a big one, obviously, for flatbeds, retail and consumer spending for a lot of the van market, which eats up a lot of this. And the government is intentionally, right, trying to pull money out of the economy to slow it down so that inflation slows, right? So as soon as I think that is at a level where there's confidence in the market, I think you're going to see these companies start growing and hopefully consumer spending a little bit. There are definitely some more articles that credit card spending has gone up, but then it came right back down because of the interest rates, because the average credit card, I think, went from like 16% a year ago to like 20% now. So consumers aren't putting as much on credit card debt this year. So I think it bodes well to everything you're saying, Nate, that, as long as you don't see something drastically negative happen on the economy and inflation stays in check, hopefully on the other side of next year, early next year, we're going to start to see companies doing better, people spending more, companies bringing in more inventory, and starting to see more of the growth mentality, hopefully. Yeah. Because to your point, the supply side on the truck side seems to be as low as it's going to get. It's really, you just need the amount of freight to start hitting the market for us to start expanding again.
Yep.
I think we also need to keep an eye on diesel fuel prices. They've ticked up considerably just in the last few weeks. And so
they kind of snuck up and people weren't really paying a whole lot of attention. I saw a map today that showed like last year versus this year and the diesel prices. And it showed, obviously last year we had that big spike in the spring or the late winter in the spring. And then into this year they had tailed off. But you're right, Jeff, the last 3 weeks or so, like they have like kind of like stealthily ticked back up a little bit. So yeah, that's a big factor. So, all right, well, we're going to have a good episode on fraud today. Ben, feel free to give a consolidated version of the DAT ad read. Our entire episode is going to be with Jeff from DAT, but you get a free month through us.
Free month. Check out the show notes to DAT1, where the market, where everybody does business in the freight side. Check out the show notes. You get a free month. Support us at Freight 360.
Absolutely. Good stuff. All right, Jeff, fraud. So we have for the little behind the scenes here for anyone listening or watching, we'd have some bullet points of things we want to talk through. But if you've listened to us or watched us before, you know that Ben and I just kind of flow things in a good conversation here. But I think a good place to start here is what the heck happened 12 months ago or even 14 months ago when fraud just started getting out of control. Because, and I'm curious what you guys have seen at DAT on your end, Jeff, because I've been in this industry for over 10 years. And, you know, I'd see the occasional double broker. We'd catch it, but it was they never intended to not pay the real carrier. They just tried to hop in and make, $50 or $100 and find another truck. So I guess curious from your point of view, what have you guys seen on DAT's side of it? When did it really start to peak, and, what the heck's going on?
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I think as we've dug in, we've learned a few things that I'd love to share. So, first of all, as I mentioned before, we've been doing this for 30 plus years. Our company's 45 years old, so we've been in this, load board, building a network and running this freight business for 30, 35 years. So to some extent, these, fraud or these kinds of, cargo theft or nothing new to us. We've been battling that forever. We have a very highly trained team that investigates, 100% of every report we get, resolves 100% of those investigations into a resolution one way or the other, right? And that's everything from cargo theft to lack of payment to double brokering to picket. We try to keep harmony in the business of what's going on. And you're right about, and the point with that is there's been years and years of data, and it's been pretty steady for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, about 12, 13, 14 months ago, somewhere in that range, depends on where you want to look at the inflection point in those charts, something happened. And I'll describe what I know about that. And it just started escalating. And as we sit here today, there's still a lot of this kind of behavior that's going on out there, not just in the DAT network, in every network, in every part of our industry that's going on. And so I work very closely with many other players, including, Truck Stop and others, just kind of comparing notes. What are you seeing? What's going on? Everybody's kind of seeing the same basic thing. Getting at the bottom of, why and what to do about it is really the important thing. And so I think the why starts with when the market went soft on rates and loads kind of dried up a little bit. That was back in, say, May of last year. We usually see a little bit of an increase anytime the rates go down. These kinds of behaviors crank back up. But I would say without question, the biggest change that we've seen in our industry, and it's really the biggest portion of the fraud that goes on from where we sit and what we see, is cybercrime. It's the cyber criminals that are operating in the U.S., but a lot outside of the U.S. And they have been, using various kinds of capabilities in terms of phishing schemes and those kinds of things to gain access to all kinds of people. And guys, I would, point, how many emails do you get where you're afraid to click the thing, right? It's really hard to tell anymore. It's like, I don't know, is that legit from this company I do business with, or is that someone else? Because you have to look really close and you see the logo is just a little off, or the URL is just a little off. It's like, thank God I didn't click it, right? Well, this happens at a scale that would just blow your mind. And so we've been working really closely with the FBI and their cybercrime unit. And so, it's not meant to be scary. That's just the world we live in, smishing, which is text based, fraud trying
I've
to.
never heard that phrase before. What I was going to say, I get like the texts all the time now, like, hey, your
got that.
debit card's locked, or click here to reset your password. I'm like, huh? So
Tons of them.
smishing,
Smishing,
SMS
SMS.
smishing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so, and it goes on and on, the number of colleagues that I know, friends of mine or whoever, who's in other companies who say, oh yeah, we got ransomware. Yeah, it was horrible. Right. I mean, and it's starting to become this thing. It's just like, yeah, it happens. Yeah. Got phished. My credit card thing got snagged. It's out of control. And it has
Maersk,
now hit our industry really hard.
I
Go
was
ahead,
going to
Jeff.
say, this is probably 5, 6 years ago now, but Maersk got hit really hard. I don't know if either of you remember that, but I mean, to the point where they shut down their entire network and they were all literally in basements. They ran to Best Buy and were handing out laptops in the basement and working off paper rolls because they got ransomware. And this is like, I want to say like 18 or 19, somewhere around there. But, and again, the numbers weren't reported as to what the number was, but it was apparently enormous on how it actually got resolved.
A company I used to work for, this would have been like 5 years ago, also got ransomware where I don't know, whoever it was hacked in and held our software hostage until we had to like send them Bitcoin or some kind of cryptocurrency.
It's usually
And
been.
like, luckily, one guy that worked at the company was a big crypto guy and like had an account, and the owners basically said, hey, we're just going to send you money, buy this and send it out. Like, we can't afford to not be in operation right now. So we just kind of like, bent over and gave into them. It's wild though.
Well, and so, I don't mean to scare anybody. I just think it's real. We all see it every day in our personal and professional lives. And so that's now hit the freight industry in a big, big way where we're being targeted. It's lucrative to steal freight, to introduce themselves into the freight transaction process and take those monies if they, have clever enough schemes to trick people into doing business with them.
So can you give a couple examples of how, like, in freight, what's an example of a fraud scam? Like, we're not talking double brokering or stuff like this. We're talking about people are actually like hacking into someone's. What does that look like in the freight world?
Yeah, because let me explain that, because so much of it, when I talk to people, in the industry, they think, oh, it's just these bad carriers or these bad brokers, a few bad eggs, and they're doing some of these things, and there's some of that, to be honest. But it's really, it's not the those individuals that kind of are doing some bad things. A lot of it is user user credentials are being phished by very sophisticated cyber criminals operating inside and outside of the US. And then once they get those credentials, they log in to an account and they basically impersonate legitimate players in the industry and then introduce themselves into that mix and then steal the money of the freight. So they'll usually it's combined with some form of double brokering to
Okay. All right.
So think of it as, let's say you have a legitimate broker posts a load, a illegitimate carrier takes the load, and then works with a brother sister illegitimate broker, like a fraudster, and then they double broker that, acting as the original legitimate broker. If you're following this,
Yep.
that kind of impersonates their identity, and then goes to a legitimate carrier and says, hey, and then usually jacks up the price. So one thing is, if the price looks too good to be true, it probably is.
Probably is.
Yep.
And then the legitimate carrier jumps on it, carries the load, and then they've introduced themselves into the middle of this. They keep the money. Sometimes if the load itself is lucrative to resell on the black market, or if it's worth a lot of money, if it's a truckload of iPhones or whatever, right? Energy drinks, pistachios. I mean, we see all kinds of different kinds of loads are easy to just steal the actual load and resell that on the black market.
So I what you just explained, that's interesting, because Ben and I have talked about how double brokerage works and what people are doing. And I didn't realize how intricate the phishing scams were, or the hacking to be able to get somebody's credentials. I just assumed that, I'm a freight broker, right? Let's say I go and I hire a carrier, And if they're pretending to be somebody else, I just assume that they went to FMCSA and like pulled up some carrier's name and MC and pretended to be that way. But you make a good point. In order for them to verify certain things about that company, they would have had to hack into,
Yeah.
whatever. They could have posted a truck on DAT or a load board that, right, if they had stolen somebody's logins. Maybe I don't want to talk about DAT in that way. You could talk about what DAT is doing, but let's say they logged into Truck Stop with somebody's stolen password, right?
Yeah.
Pretended to be, a legit carrier when they're not. So is that kind of some of the stuff that we're seeing?
It's some of the stuff, but it's a spectrum. Honestly, it's there are bots that are attack. Utilizing. I mean, what does it take to get an MC number from the FMCSA? Not much, right?
Yeah.
So basically,
very low barrier to entry.
Use bots to register through FMCSA in any number of MC numbers, and then act with that authority essentially, even if they're duplicate MC numbers. So these are the questions, Nate, when we're at the TIA session. We want the policy forum. We want to ask the FMCSA execs that are coming in there. It's like, how are you going to tighten up what it takes to obtain an MC, the use of duplicate MCs? I mean, because it's easy to just guess what those things are. They even just recently changed their policy on what it takes to change all of your account information with FMCSA, and they just now implement a new policy to require photo ID to do that. Otherwise, a fraudster could come in and say, "Hey, I need to change all of my personal information that's tied to this MC." Okay, sure. What is it?
Oh,
and
my
now
gosh.
they just took that MC, and so this is what's been going on. And so the whole industry has had to wake up to tightening up how we do business. And this is all juxtaposed to, the digital ecosystem that we all now, conduct freight in. So the more automation and the more digital kind of processes that take place, the more, the more risk there is for people to introduce themselves into the fray, because we don't do as much verification over the phone. It's like, am I talking to Nate Cross, or am I talking to, yeah, sure you are. It's like, you have to do the identity verification is the number one thing, that we're focused on. And the number one thing that everybody should be focused on is make sure you're doing business with who you think you're doing business with, because it may not be that.
It's so funny.
What's wild, just real quick, is like how much does it take to get an authority? It's $300 to apply for any kind of authority through the FMCSA, and that's like a fraction of one hijacked load. That's it, right? If you double broker a load and you get a quick pay for $3,000 from some legit broker, and then you just fall off the face of the earth and never pay whoever you rebrokered it to, that will fund 10 more authorities to the FMCSA.
Yeah,
it's insane. So
it was just, it's a little bit of a side note, but it's to the same topic. My wife is getting into the real estate industry and just got her license, and she was telling me about a similar fraudulent thing that she went through in their training with her broker, actually like yesterday, the day before. And they do exactly what you're saying. And they do it at the closing time of a sale of a house. So they will fish that information. And right before the transaction is funded to pay for the house, they will basically send an email right from like a fished, or they will represent the buyer or the seller, right? And then go, oh, hey, sorry, the wires instructions just changed. Fund it here, and they will literally take the money of the home purchase, right? And the exact same type of fraudulent activity, which is bloom. I'm like, that seems plausible and possible, and it kind of freaks me out, because I think the more we use these things, like I get frustrated every time I do multi-factor authentication for everything sometimes. And again, like Nate and I talk about, like, you got to do this 4 or 5 times. But the reality is like, we don't see or hear the things you're talking about, I think, on a day-to-day basis. So it seems distant and far away that these threats are. But the reality is like, they're literally in everyone's computer to some degree, or could be, no matter the size of your company.
MFA is your friend, and you have to use it. You have to do, the best offense in this is a good defense. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One is cybercrime has become the most profitable crime beyond drug trade, beyond everything there is out there.
Full stop.
It's trillions of dollars, and it's global, right? And it's just globally. It's just huge, and it's every industry. It's every facet of our lives. And credit card industry, financial services industry has been battling this for years and years, right? So that's nothing new to them. It's a little bit new to freight. Well, here it is. It's here, and now we've got to have a good defense, both your cybersecurity in your company, all the ways that employees in every company protects their credentials and their information, to how you verify when you're conducting business with people, to just all of the different precautions that you have to take, because just know there's people out there trying to trick people and operate in this space. And the amount of this crime that gets investigated is very, very small. The amount of crime that gets investigated is small, and the amount of prosecutions that happen in those investigations is even smaller. And a lot of the times they're outside of the U.S. Working closely with the FBI. I didn't realize, because you hear about Armenia and Russia and different Eastern Bloc countries. Nigeria, turns out, is a huge entity of all kinds of organizations. They're criminal organizations that are operating and getting more and more and more sophisticated every day. So, and some of these things sort of lie in waiting, right? So they've obtained access and they're just waiting for the right time, kind of like the
big opportunity
mortgage example that you gave. Is then they know exactly when the right time to pounce and get involved in that transaction to steal the money.
That's crazy.
So, am I scaring people? I hope I'm not trying to scare people, but
it's healthy to make people realize how
healthy
serious
sense of
this
fear.
is.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I do want people to know, though, that with our network, and we've been doing this a long time, we have 100% resolution of everything that we know of that happens. I mean, we have removed 7,000 accounts from our network that we believe to be bad, fraudulent, or engaged in some kind of bad behavior since January of last year. So
yeah, I'm curious, what kind of steps has DAT taken? And because I did see recently, if someone's trying to sign up for a new account and they don't have an authority, they got to call. They just can't go and do it online anymore.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah. And we used to be, before we had all this activity, we would just presume that you were legitimate, you have all the right credentials, you met this, these things. And so we're tightening all of those identity checks and verifications are now both more sophisticated in the automation we're deploying. And then also we do tons of manual checks. So I've doubled the size of our team that checks all these things out. We operate, around the clock, 24/7, checking every, suspicious activity we are aware of or can be, made aware of, both from customers or just ourselves from what we see in our systems. We're implementing, improvements in how you can protect your credentials. So MFA and those kinds of security checks. We're also, implementing more and more sophistication in the actual transaction that goes on our platform. So looking for, if someone is searching, if we have an entity that's searching for loads, like hundreds of thousands of loads from all over the United States, and they are an owner operator operating with one truck, according to their MC, there's something suspicious there, right? So that's an obvious one. But there's a number of those that we're getting, more and more dialed in to say, all right, let's flag all the suspicious behavior, chase those things down, and try to root them out.
So I want to pick your brain on some of those specific data points. But first, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Lean Solutions Group. Are you looking to take your freight brokerage or agency to the next level? Look no further than Lean Solutions Group. They're industry leaders in nearshore staffing for logistics companies with offices located in South America, Mexico, and the Philippines. They offer a wide range of exciting positions, including freight broker back office operations, accounting, tech and web development, business development, marketing, customer service, and more. Don't miss out on the opportunity to work with the best in the business. Visit them at leangroup.com. That's LEAN group.com to learn more. All right, so specific data points. So you brought up a good one, Jeff. If a carrier that shows, hey, I got one truck, or in some cases, there's zero registered assets. If they're are you looking at how much they're posting or how much they're searching at freight
Both.
loads that are posted. What's like an
Oh,
example of a data point? I mean, I don't know how much you guys or how much you can disclose that's not
yeah.
proprietary to DAT, but what are some of the like blatant red flags that your security looks at?
Yeah, I mean, I said one real obvious one, and I honestly can't really share too much because
I
I
figured as
don't want
much.
the fraudsters to know kind of what we look at. Here's what we can say: we look at everything. So our data scientists, you've met, our chief of analytics, Ken Adamo, unbelievably smart guy, very capable. He's got a very large team. He's all over this, and he and his team, they are looking at every. We've learned a lot from the patterns. So try to connect two dots. One is we have this, network governance team that's been doing this for years and years. So they have detected all kinds of patterns in the kinds of reports that they investigate. They have now turned that over to the data science team that Ken runs and said, okay, here's what we see. So now Ken and his team is building upon that and finding lots of different scenarios where things just don't maybe add up, or they would generate a risk flag to say, okay, something here doesn't look right. Then it gets kicked back over to the network governance team to say, hey, Chet, look into this one, because we have, we do 250,000 transactions a minute on our platform, posting,
Wow. A minute? How many a
searching,
minute? You said 250
250,000 transactions a minute that go
a
on.
minute.
So we can't
Wow.
look at every single thing that happens, every truck that gets posted, because that's millions a day, in terms of who are they, but what we can do is make sure that, when they sign up or log in, that we have vetted them very carefully. And so we're doing that. Then once they're in, assuming they pass that vetting, that rigorous vetting, that we look at, okay, what are they doing? And maybe a legitimate customer entity has been compromised and they don't know it. We see that a lot. It's like, that's not me. I didn't do that. I'm not out there searching for those loads. Well, it looks like you are. They're using your MC, maybe your login to do that. So those are the things we look for and we catch, and then we try to, eradicate that. And so sometimes it's as simple as it's a legitimate, player operator, and they got their login compromised and they didn't know it. And so we, reset them and get them back on track with a new, set of information.
Have you guys tried to leverage any of the emerging AI tools that are out there to try and like automate the process or do a lot of the heavy lifting so it's not as manual?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, we're very sophisticated in that regard, Ken and his team as well, right? Of implementing all the latest, kind of capabilities in data science and AI to do some of that. I think, the future is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one side, the criminals are going to use AI in more and more clever and sophisticated ways. That's a little scary, like staying ahead of that. And then the good guys, us, we're going to be using AI to stay ahead of them and to deploy it to find things, in a much more faster and automated way.
I have a question. Does that, and it's a little off topic, but I've read quite a bit that what you just described kind of scares me, because it's basically an arms race, right? And now it's an arms race between obviously the criminals and the people trying to prevent the criminals. But if both people are pushing that, how do you feel? I mean, just as a general side note, how do you feel in your gut about the next 5 to 10 years as it relates to really kind of the arms race of who's got the better tech and who can get there faster for the industry as a whole?
It's a great question, Ben. And we debate this inside of DAT all the time. And, my money's on, the for lack of a better term, the good guys, the companies, all the companies operating very legitimately. We have the best and brightest people who can stay ahead of the criminals. Once we decide, we're as an objective, we're going to go do this, I think then it will get done. The problem is the incentives on the criminal side are just really big.
Much bigger. They're huge.
And so that's where the last piece of this puzzle and what I spent a lot of my time on, as well as, our general counsel and our CEO is, okay, so we can snip it out. Like I said, we've removed thousands of fraudulent actors from our system. but they just go and operate somewhere else. And we know that because we talk with other people, and there's like, yeah, they're just bouncing around this industry. There needs to be prosecution. And so we're working.
Someone has to be made an example of.
Yeah. And so I was pleasantly surprised. And actually the FBI would be the same thing. It's like, most of you think we don't really do anything. We actually do. And so, cybercrime is one of the biggest crimes. I think the biggest challenge in some of the prior years was that most often nobody gets hurt, like physically. There's not harm to a person. And so that's usually where they've set their priorities. But now the numbers are so big and it's so pervasive, and it's a national security threat. And so the three industries that the FBI is most focused on, amongst all the fraud and cybercrime going on in every industry, in every facet of our life, they've chosen, obviously, defense. So they're really focused there. Energy grid, right? So energy. So no one messes with our energy grid. And then third is transportation, us. And
that's interesting.
But
you think about it, I mean,
supply chain. Yeah.
You just named basically three facets of our infrastructure. Like, one, defend it with defense. Two, the energy grid. Otherwise, we're, without power. And then our supply chain.
Yeah.
Transportation. Exactly. So that's huge.
And that, honestly, that's the one that scares me the most, just being in it, right? And again, not as much, I would say, on the freight broker, but again, kind of, right? Like, because even like in freight forwarding, right, which is a little outside our niche, but is, hand in hand with ours, most of the stuff that we move in the country came from overseas. Like, if you're impersonating people, right, those licenses, right, are what allow people to bring goods into the United States. And we also know, like, trucking has been a shelter for lots of people with human trafficking, right? And like these really egregious things that happen that just I was completely unaware of until like a few recent years ago, just how prevalent it is and just some of these things. And it's like, it really is a little unnerving to realize that, it's not just a few $1,000s here and there. Like, these things can impact human beings' lives as well as,
and so one of the biggest things that, message I'd love to send to all your listeners is, even a suspicion, but certainly if you've been a victim of some kind of fraud, or you believe you have been, report it to DAT if you're operating with us, and also report it to your local FBI office. It's that simple. They all have cybercrime units, and they are actively building databases, leaning into this. I just conducted a webinar with the head of cybercrime at the FBI that we work with. And it's like they have this IC3 database that they load all this stuff in. They're getting more and more sophisticated, and it starts there. They also have a very good success record in asset recovery. So about a 73% success rate in asset recovery. If you report it to them right away, they can stop payments. They can stop that transaction of money going to a criminal fairly effectively. But
I think what's unfortunate is a lot of times, if a broker falls victim to a double broker or a fraudulent broker scam, the money's already gone. Like what I've seen a lot, and we're getting better at it at my company. When it first started about Memorial Day last year, what we would find was whoever the fraudster was would request a quick pay from us. We would pay it. And then we'd find out down the road, some other carrier comes around either to us or to our customer asking, where's my money? I hauled this load. Here's the proof. And we're like, well, shit, we quick paid them like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Even our standard pay would have paid 30 days ago.
Right.
But, you learn those vulnerabilities, and we had to, we had to really tighten down our SOPs within our brokerage as far as, hey, this is a brand new carrier. We're not going to authorize any kind of quick pay or wire until we get definitive GPS tracking or an ELD download, a picture of them at the loading facility with their truck and MC number on this clearly visible on the side of it at our recognizable loading facility. Things like that we never had to worry about years ago because it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And that obviously became big too, to try and verify is this person who they say they are. But it's wild.
We mentioned, like factoring, quick pay is kind of a version of that. We see dramatically less of that happening in factoring. So I think factoring is a good thing to do for cash flow in general. And the factoring companies, they're financial services companies. So they've been doing this a long time. and they have that's an extra layer and level of vetting for a carrier, for example, to make sure they're going to get paid.
I
That's a
have
real
heard
good point.
reports of like certain bad factoring companies that were like almost, or at least have been reported to be in on some of these scams. Though I don't know the full like
Well, yeah, that's a good point,
breakdown on it,
because
but
there are, hundreds of factoring companies out there, right? And
yeah,
so go with a big one, a legit, one that's really well trusted. We use OTR.
yep,
They're awesome. They are amazing. They're super sharp at what they do. They're very, very good. If you factor with OTR, you're gonna be in great shape.
that's good. Good stuff. Well, it's been a good discussion. Anything we didn't hit on in the fraud side of things that you want to get to on this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's trust but verify, as the old saying goes. We've kind of, for years and years operating in this industry, you always verified, got on the phone with people. Hey, how are you operating? You have this load. Are you available? All the different things. And then we've kind of gotten away from that because, we move at a velocity and a speed that's very fast. So I think it's just the trust, but do that extra step of verification of who you're doing business with. And, if something looks a little suspicious, it probably is, like if you see funky URLs, hey, just call Josh on this number. I mean, pretty basic stuff. It's going to, there's a likelihood that something, it's not always, but likelihood that there's something fishy going on there. And so just, take that extra moment. And I think it goes a long ways.
Yeah, one of the things that we started doing, and it takes a little bit of like practice on the personality side of it, but because there's good actors out there that because of the bad actors, the good actors kind of get, it sucks for them that they have to go through all these extra steps, or they might be accused of being a fraudster when they're not. But one of the things that we started to do is like be very nice and kind when you start to trust but verify, right? Use those extra challenges, ask those extra questions, things like, hey, my customer's been really, they're starting to crack down a little bit with some of the fraud that's been going on. Can you just verify the name and MC that's going to be on the side of the truck that pulls up and the color of the cab? They want to make sure that they've got everything lined up for the day. So now it's like I made it very clear that I'm going to add this additional challenge, but I didn't say, hey, I think you're a fraudster. I'm going to challenge you. It's like, hey, my customer, yada, yada, yada. So this is a new SOP. And like, in my opinion, more than 9 times out of 10, if you just mention that stuff, they'll be like, oh, I don't have a truck available.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, hey, let me call you back. I got to find out which truck number it's going to be. Never hear back. Right.
That's where tracking and visibility verifications also.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're not where you say you are.
Exactly. We had a guy, I've told this story before, but we had a guy that he set up GPS tracking with who we thought was the carrier, and the carrier intended to forward the link to the actual carrier to have real tracking, but opened up the link on their phone. They were in Azerbaijan, and we're like, oh my gosh, man! Like you're literally by the Caspian Sea right now. You definitely don't have a truck in Houston.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that when you make it well known that these are the things that we require. And we started, even like my company, we added it in as part of our terms and conditions for quick pays to a carrier. The first 3 times you haul a load as a new motor carrier of ours, you cannot get a quick pay unless you've had, and it's like I said, it's in the rate confirmation, you've got to have continuous GPS tracking. And as a backup, we will allow an ELD download, but it's just, people get mad. They're like, well, even the good ones, they're like, well, I didn't know that. Well, you didn't read it, or, hey, just give us an ELD download and we'll make it work. But it is just crazy how hard people try. I'll give one more super quick story. This is happening right now this week. We have a carrier that double brokered a load of ours about a month ago, and they come back to us and they're lying. They are so persistent that they didn't do this, and we know they did, and we have proof that they did. They're going to our customer, like they forged documents trying to go to the customer to get paid, and we're like, dude, we know you double brokered this. Like, if you didn't, send us an ELD download to show us where your truck was. And they just keep ignoring that request, going to the carrier, trying to get money out of them. It's a very, very high, it's a 5-digit, over $10,000 value load for the freight bill. So like you said, the reward for them is so incentivizing that they'll go to ridiculous lengths just to try and scam somebody. So now they're not even just trying to scam us, they're trying to scam our customer, which then can hurt our relationship. But it's just absolutely wild, the stuff that's
And to
going
your
on.
point earlier, Jeff, right? Like 10 grand is a lot of money in the US, but it's a lot more money in the countries you've named as well,
In
right? Like you're
Nigeria.
talking like, like
That's
annual
life-changing
salaries, if
money.
not
Yeah.
more, right? So again, I mean, they'll keep knocking on the door. And if no one's going to come and there's no penalty, I mean, until there's some prosecution and you start to see some accountability,
Yeah.
it's likely going to be an uphill battle.
I'm excited for the policy forum. And Jeff, I'm glad you're going to be there too, because you definitely you got a good pulse read on what's going on. When were you there last year by any chance, Jeff, or no?
Not last year, but the year before.
Okay. So last year obviously was the first year when double brokering and fraud brokering became like such a hot topic. That's pretty much all we wanted to talk about. But it blew my mind to find out that the FMCSA does have a $10,000 fine for fraudulent brokerage activity. They had 60,000 complaints, I think, cumulative by last September, and they had looked into zero of them. There was they took no action on it. And I remember
as of 2 months ago, there was 88,000 in that database.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to have to answer a lot of tough questions from a lot of really pissed off people that, like, my company has, because what happens is, right, the customer is ultimately liable to pay a freight bill, but as a broker, to save a relationship, we're just gonna pay the proper carrier, and then we've basically made 2 payments and we lost money. And this has happened so many times that we've got carrier or brokers out there that we've lost $100,000 or more. Right? Not everybody has, but the larger your brokerage is, the more instances you probably dealt with in the last year before you were able to get a grasp on it. But you got a lot of really upset, angry people that want answers as to why is DOT and the FMCSA, why aren't they doing anything? Is it a lack of manpower? Is it a lack of, some kind of technology or infrastructure? Is it a lack of just awareness of it? But it's really, I mean, at least we can go and not just talk with them, but go lobby to all the senators and Congress folks. And
that's what we all have to do, is insist on, prosecution basically in stopping this behavior, because it's just getting worse and worse, right? It's becoming more and more lucrative for people to do this. And so if you think, like 2 years ago, the FMCSA was manpower. We just don't have the manpower to do this. Then, and it's the government. So they have a 2-year plan to go build some new technology. And they're very proud of that 2-year plan, but it's like, 2 years from now, are you kidding me? This needs to be done in the next 3-6 months. And private sector does that, right? We just go do that. We just go attack the problem, put it in place, and off we go. With the parent of FMCSA is the DOT. Yep. And so we've opened up a dialogue with the Department of Transportation Inspector General office. And we're also trying to talk with them about, okay, what more can be done? Because that's a very big organization that does have a lot more power and authority to do things. So we're trying all angles.
I thought I wanted to ask, because all I could think of in my head as we were talking through this is that old adage, right? Like, it's going to take an act of Congress to fix this. And I'm like, it's literally going to take an act of Congress. I'm like, but the fact that it is, again, somewhat also, I think, crossing that line of like literally defense and like the supply chain of the country, I feel like there's got to be some area where they're able to not have to create some congressional budget to be able to have to overhaul a system to create some accountability or prosecution. Do you think that's pretty likely, or do you think that's...
Yeah. And we are, we the collective, is working with a range, TIA, OIDA, everybody's working with, the legislative branch to come up with, and there's a number of senators and Congress people who are interested in doing something. I think they just don't know what to do. If you think about when the supply chain, got disrupted, and I think Biden was, famous for saying, does anyone really know what the supply chain is? Okay. It's, and so, the fraud and double brokering, like you even the head of cybercrime that from the FBI that, I've been working with is like, now tell me again, double brokering, that refers to what? I mean, because they deal with cybercrime on a scale that's so big, it infiltrates everybody's life. And so if you think about like I actually have a lot of empathy for, older people who get scammed every single day in hundreds of thousands. and they're, like they get major amounts of their retirement or their livelihood stolen every day through the same thing, right? And then there's our industry,
Yes.
there's all these threats. We've got to rein in this whole cybercrime issue before it becomes so bad that we can't conduct business in a modern, infrastructure.
Once trust is gone, right? Like it's the Wild West. I mean, literally. I mean, because, when there's no regulation, there's no prosecution, people are going to keep doing those things. I mean, it's been around since the dawn of time as far as like human civilization. There's going to be crime. And if people don't feel like they're going to get caught, they're going to keep doing more of it.
Yeah, I also say that sometimes, like, hey, is this like, cargo theft and some of the fraud that goes on? It's like, it's been going on since there were wagons hauling freight, right? There's incentives for criminals to steal freight. And it always has been, probably always will be. The methods are just now far more sophisticated.
Yeah, I always think back to I'm a big fan of the Fast and Furious franchise, and back when that first movie came out, and it opens up with 3 cars circling a semi truck, and they steal a bunch of electronics, right? The way in which fraud activity happens will change, and the kind of like the goods that are being stolen will change as well. So no one's stealing VCRs anymore, right? They're stealing all like computer chips and iPhones, like you mentioned, and the way that it's happening is different too, right? Instead of surrounding a truck with 3 whatever kind of Honda Accords or whatever it was, or Civics, they're doing it other ways with cybercrime and impersonating somebody and stealing money that way, and through getting wire advances, pretending to be someone that they're not.
Turns out it's far safer, to just.
I was just going to say that.
From a computer,
way less risk
in place, and hey, and they don't even have to have a very high success rate, right? I don't think about it. It's like you can perpetrate so many attempts in such a vast amount of time, and you just need a couple of them to work out, and you're way ahead of the game. And you're not even in physical sight. It's kind of interesting. I mean, let's think about that for just a second. So sometimes this parallel gets made. It's like someone in your hometown, in Boca or wherever you're in Buffalo, they rob a bank, and it's like full scale bulletin to every law enforcement entity in the area, shut down the roads. We're going to find these perpetrators that stole $70,000,
70 grand. Yeah.
And then you think about the crime that's happening in cyber. It's millions. Like, I have a friend who, her company, they paid a $10 million ransom. And it was just like, okay,
gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah. And so, a load, I heard about a load from, wasn't on our system, but from one of the big operators in our industry. It was, $6 million load of Bitcoin equipment, sophisticated computers doing that. $6 million. I mean, if there was a bank robbery of $6 million, can you imagine
states? Yeah.
How much effort would be made to try to find that person, and they would certainly be prosecuted.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Well, great discussion on fraud. Jeff, I definitely got to get together with you in DC next month and pick your brain some more. I look forward to that trip a lot. I'm trying to convince Ben to get down there, but we'll take us up there.
It sounds like Ben's quite the golfer, so we'd have to kind of compare some.
Are you playing in the golf tournament?
I'm going to try.
All right.
I am going to try. So
yeah.
My schedule allows, I will do it.
I did last year. It was a lot of fun. I guess the difference being last year, the golf tournament was I think it was the day before. Yeah, it was the day before we met on Capitol Hill. And this year it's the day afterward. So at least we'll get business out of the way, and then we can go have fun afterward. But anyway, great conversation. Jeff Hopper, the Chief Marketing Officer at DAT. Are you on LinkedIn? Where can people find you if they want to connect with you and reach out to you?
LinkedIn works great. Yeah.
Perfect.
Also, where's the best way, easiest way for this to be reported to DAT? Through the website? Is there an email that they can send this to for anybody to report this as soon as they know that it's happening? Where would you suggest is the easiest way for them to send this stuff to?
Yeah. So I don't recall the phone number memorized off the top of my head, but our customer service phone number works great. There's also on our website is a fraud protection program that has lots of training information, helpful information. We put our alerts out there so you can kind of be kept aware of all the latest kind of schemes that are going on. There's many. Please utilize this amazing team. Just a shout out to them. I mean, they are just unbelievably smart, unbelievably hardworking, dedicated people that are completely committed to, snuffing out this issue. And so give them a call. It's as simple as that. And we assign someone to your situation and try to resolve it as fast as possible, because time is of the essence when this happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Time is money.
I'll speak for myself. I'll let Nate speak for him, but really appreciate everything you guys are doing there, because again, if there is no trust in the market no longer exists, and how transportation moves and the supply chain functions will not operate if people don't go there and don't trust the people they're doing business with.
Yeah. Lastly, again, thanks, Jeff, for coming on. The one glimmer of hope that I have with all of this, and we talked about the arms race of AI with the bad guys and the good guys, but at least us good guys can all collaborate, right? Shippers, brokers, software providers, we can all be transparent with one another and work together. Whereas the bad guys oftentimes have compartmentalized themselves. And I think that we will ultimately win that race because of our collaboration amongst one another. So
that's a really, really good point, Nate. And we're doing exactly that. So we invite anybody in this space to work with us. We often get looked to because we're fairly large and we have, this great data science team, et cetera. So we're pulling in, players and, in the ecosystem, partners, customers, anyone who wants to be part of the solution, to band together, to stop this. Give me a shout. We'll include you in all of our work.
Awesome. Well, good stuff. Jeff Hopper with DAT. Great to have you on. Ben, any final thoughts from you before we wrap it up here?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.